Miranda stood at the front door of her childhood home, balancing a perfectly wrapped box of gifts in one hand and a homemade apple pie in the other. The December air was sharp against her cheeks, but the familiar scent of cinnamon, pine, and roasted turkey drifted out through the doorframe like a warm invitation. Twinkling lights outlined the eaves in neat rows, and a velvet red wreath hung with precision on the front door, the kind of holiday aesthetic she had once tried to replicate in her own city apartment, but never with quite the same effect. Everything looked unchanged, preserved in its suburban perfection, and yet she felt like a stranger waiting to be let in. She had spent days planning for this visit. The pie had been baked from scratch using her grandmother's old recipe, the one her mother used to dismiss as too rustic. The gifts were thoughtful, tailored, carefully labeled with calligraphy tags and matching ribbon. She had gone out of her way to arrive on time, having driven 6 hours in holiday traffic from her new firm's headquarters in Philadelphia. And despite the years of tension and the coldness she had come to expect, there was a flicker of hope nestled deep inside her, fragile but insistent, that maybe this year things would be different. That maybe, just once, someone would be happy to see her. The door swung open before she had the chance to knock. Laughter spilled out from inside, loud and familial, and behind it the murmur of overlapping conversations and clinking glasses. Her mother, Caroline, appeared in the doorway, expression unreadable. She glanced down briefly at the pie, then back up without moving to take it or help. No greeting, no warm words, just a step aside and a perfunctory nod to indicate Miranda should come in. Inside, the living room was full. Cousins, in-laws, neighbors. Her father's booming voice rose above the rest as he lifted a toddler in the air, beaming, surrounded by an attentive cluster of relatives. Someone called out for extra chairs. Someone else commented on the turkey. No one looked up when she entered. Miranda walked in quietly, careful not to bump anyone with the pie or the stack of presents. She placed them on the side table near the tree, an opulent 12-foot spruce adorned in gold and white ornaments. Her name was nowhere on the garlands of handwritten tags hanging from the mantel. Someone passed her without acknowledging her presence. Another person smiled absently, then looked away before Miranda could say hello. She pressed her lips together, adjusted the sleeves of her coat, and tried to summon calm. After all, it wasn't new. The undercurrent of exclusion, the subtle disinterest, the way her presence always seemed to disrupt more than add. Her heart pulsed against the quiet ache of being unseen. But she kept her posture straight, held her breath for a second longer than necessary, and reminded herself that she was a guest now, an adult woman with a life, a title, and a company behind her. She didn't need their approval. Not anymore. Still, when her mother disappeared back into the kitchen without a word and her father called someone else, "My star," Miranda felt something inside her tighten, just slightly. She smiled at the nearest cousin, nodded at the ornaments, and repeated the phrase she had taught herself to say on these occasions, "It's fine, you're fine, everything is fine." But already, beneath the practiced exterior, her heart was curling into a small, bracing shape. Miranda moved slowly through the living room, her smile tight, rehearsed, as she stopped near clusters of relatives engaged in conversation. She listened for a pause, waited for an opening, and inserted a gentle comment about a recent sustainable office project she had led. The words barely landed before someone turned the topic elsewhere. A cousin chuckled and redirected the group's attention toward Lauren's engagement ring, holding up a hand to catch the light. Miranda stood awkwardly on the edge of the circle, nodding along as if the interruption hadn't stung, pretending she hadn't come prepared to contribute something meaningful. Her attempts repeated themselves throughout the evening, always with the same outcome. She spoke about a design award her firm had received. Someone yawned. She referenced a profile in an architectural journal. Someone asked if she had seen Travis's new beach house. The pattern was seamless, almost choreographed. No one was unkind directly. But no one asked questions, no one followed up, no one stayed with her long enough to hear the second half of any sentence. She floated from group to group, like a polite ghost weaving through a home she used to know. The younger kids passed her in a rush of noise and laughter, trailing wrapping paper and cookie crumbs. None of them greeted her. Her niece avoided her gaze. One nephew whispered something to another and giggled as they both took a sharp turn to avoid brushing past her in the hallway. Miranda knelt to retrieve a discarded gift bow from under a chair, straightened, and took a breath as she approached the dining room. Her mother stood near the fireplace, organizing name cards and barking soft instructions for the family photo. Everyone was being arranged with precision. Lauren and her fiancé front and center, Travis and his wife directly beside them, aunts and uncles flanking both ends. Miranda hovered near the edge, clutching her phone, unsure whether to wait or step forward. She finally asked where she should stand, voice low and steady. Her mother paused, glanced over her shoulder, then said she should take the photo. Miranda was always good with technology. She took the phone. Her fingers were steady, but her eyes burned. As she stepped back to frame the group, she noticed the positioning. Every branch of the family represented, arms linked, smiling, heads tilted in affection. Except her. She adjusted the angle and pressed the shutter. No one noticed the tremble in her hand. She took 3 photos, then another 3, ensuring everyone looked their best. She handed back the phone and quietly stepped out of the frame once more. Later, while refilling drinks in the kitchen, she overheard a cousin praise Travis's latest real estate deal, claiming it was brilliant how he leveraged city zoning loopholes. The group murmured admiration. Miranda's throat tightened. She had submitted expert testimony on zoning reform for the same district 2 months prior. No one seemed to remember. She stood near the kitchen island, sipping water, scanning the room as though through glass. Every interaction passed through her. She was present in every room, but never truly invited into them. The scent of baked ham and cinnamon pine cones drifted in warm waves around her, clinging to a moment that should have felt like belonging. But all she felt was distance. And as she watched the group crowd together again for candid snapshots, she caught her own reflection in the darkened window, just outside the edge of the scene, camera in hand, like always. Tucked deep inside her overnight bag, beneath a folded sweater and a scarf she didn't need, lay the gift Miranda had debated bringing for weeks. It was wrapped like the others, carefully, tastefully, with dark green paper and a wide ivory ribbon. From the outside, it looked no different than a coffee table book or a vintage photo album. But the weight of it was unmistakable, not in mass, but in meaning. Inside were pages filled not with festive nostalgia, but with truth. Her truth. The album had taken her months to compile. In its pages were printed emails that had been forwarded to colleagues with her name omitted or misrepresented. Screenshots of messages Travis had sent under anonymous usernames, belittling her designs on public forums. Voice memos forwarded by a former co-worker where Travis laughed about sabotaging her pitch deck by leaking early drafts to rival firms. Even a letter from her college mentor, long buried in her inbox, recounting a mysterious phone call warning against her promotion. The same promotion she never received. Each piece had once been a jagged wound. Years of gaslighting had made her question whether it was all in her head, whether her own family could truly be capable of orchestrated undermining. But as she gathered each artifact, each thread of the same web, the pattern became undeniable. It was not clumsiness or coincidence, it was intent. Her therapist had watched quietly as Miranda laid the binder on her lap during their final session before the trip. She hadn't opened it, hadn't needed to. She simply said, in her calm, low voice, that the decision wasn't about confrontation, it was about reclamation. Not about making them see her, but about her finally seeing them. It wasn't revenge, it was release. Miranda hadn't known until the last minute whether she would go through with it. As she zipped up her suitcase that morning, the album sat on her desk like a silent dare. She stared at it for a long time, then slid it in beneath her clothes. She didn't know what she expected. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Now, back in the house, hours after her arrival and long after the photo session, she waited until the room was momentarily empty. The living room was hushed, lit only by the soft white lights of the tree. She moved quietly across the rug, knelt by the base of the spruce, and set the gift gently among the others. Her fingers lingered for a second on the ribbon. Tucked inside the front cover, beneath the title page, was a single handwritten note. Short, neat, without flourish. "This is my parting gift, not for you. For me." She stood, adjusted her sleeves, and exhaled. The room behind her had already begun to fill again with chatter and clinking glass. She turned back once, just briefly, to glance at the bundle nestled beneath the boughs. No tag, no name, no need. She walked toward the dining room, heart quiet but clear, ready to sit at a table where she already knew she didn't belong. This was her last supper, and that, for the first time, gave her peace. The dining room had been transformed for the occasion. A long table stretched beneath a white linen cloth, adorned with pine garlands, tapered candles, and crystal glasses already filled with sparkling cider. The silverware gleamed under the overhead chandelier, every setting laid with care. Name cards were placed above each plate in delicate cursive. Laughter echoed through the hallway as guests gathered, coats shed, plates passed from the kitchen. Miranda stepped forward, scanning the table for her name. She moved slowly, trailing her fingers along the edge of each chair as she read the names. Lauren, Travis, Rebecca, Aunt Helen, Uncle Mark, Tyler, Jenna, Greg, Father, Mother. 10 cards, 10 chairs. She paused, frowned, and began again, double-checking. The numbers didn't add up. There were 12 people in the house, not 10, but only 10 places set. Her name was nowhere. For a moment she stood still, staring at the blank spaces between the settings as if willing her name to appear. She looked around. No extra chairs lined the wall. No one seemed to notice, or maybe they did and pretended not to. She approached her mother, who stood near the kitchen archway, folding napkins with mechanical grace. Miranda asked quietly if she had perhaps missed her card or if there had been a mistake. Her mother didn't look up. She responded briskly, suggesting that perhaps Miranda could take her plate into the living room with the kids. Or, if that wasn't comfortable, she could always eat in the car. It would be quieter after all. Behind her, Travis chuckled, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Something about not wasting a seat. A few others laughed with him, dry, quick laughs that held more cruelty than humor. No one stopped to correct him. No one disagreed. Miranda didn't answer. She turned without a word, walked back through the hallway, past the tree, past the family photo still glowing on someone's phone screen. She picked up the pie she had brought, the same one no one had touched. She reached for her coat, pulled it over her shoulders with slow precision. Her boots echoed faintly on the tile as she stepped out the front door. The cold hit her skin like a balm. The darkness outside wrapped around her like a quiet promise. She walked to her car, opened the door, and slid inside. The interior was cold, but she didn't turn the engine on. She sat in silence, hands on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the quiet street ahead. No music played, no tears came. In the stillness of that parked car, something shifted. She had always believed there was still something worth returning for, some hidden thread that might reconnect her to the family she had spent a lifetime chasing. But tonight, something inside her let go. The ache didn't vanish, but the illusion did. And in that small, private death of expectation, she found a strange and unfamiliar kind of clarity. From that night on, Miranda vanished. Not dramatically, not with announcements or farewells, but with a quiet finality. She stopped answering messages. Calls went to voicemail. Invitations to weddings, baby showers, birthdays, all were ignored or returned unopened. Her name slowly disappeared from group chats. On social media, her profiles went dark, then disappeared entirely. She became, in digital and emotional terms, a ghost. One who had once lingered at the edge of every family gathering, now utterly and irrevocably absent. At first, the silence was met with confusion. Her mother called repeatedly, leaving breathless voicemails with a tone swinging between guilt and outrage. When that failed, she turned to others, cousins, old neighbors, mutual acquaintances, asking if anyone had heard from Miranda. Eventually, she confided in a friend over coffee, voice tight with indignation and self-pity, questioning how her daughter could be so cruel, so ungrateful, so cold. The question went unanswered, but the unease lingered. In the absence of Miranda, the family dynamic shifted. Something unspoken but essential had gone missing. The scapegoat, the buffer, the one who had always absorbed the family's discomfort, who had smiled through their dismissals, who had made their dysfunction seem tolerable. Without her, there was no longer a common outlet, no quiet backstop for everyone else's fragile egos. The cracks began to show. Lauren, once the adored younger sister, turned on Travis with sharp, sudden clarity. She brought up stories no one had asked to remember, how Travis had sabotaged her teenage relationship by leaking private messages, how he mocked her behind closed doors while pretending to be the supportive sibling. Her voice, once placid at family dinners, grew cold and distant. She stopped showing up altogether. Weeks later, she packed her things and moved to Seattle without saying goodbye. Tension seeped into every remaining room of the house. Small irritations became arguments. Disagreements that had once been swept aside now ignited full-blown fights. The father, once stoic and composed, began lashing out at trivial things: broken remotes, lukewarm coffee, noise from the television. He blamed Miranda's mother for losing control of the family, accusing her of driving their daughter away with constant criticism. She retaliated with bitter accusations of her own, of favoritism, of negligence, of always taking Travis's side. The home, once curated to resemble order and tradition, began to fray. Dinners were eaten in separate rooms. Phone calls ended in silence or slammed receivers. Family events became logistical challenges rather than moments of joy. Everyone still played their roles, but without conviction. And the more they tried to hold it all together, the more they realized how much of their fragile stability had rested on Miranda's quiet tolerance. Without her, the delicate balance collapsed. No one said her name, but her absence filled every space. Each fight, each silence, each awkward pause around the table was haunted by the shape of the person they had once called difficult. Now, in the ruin she left behind, they began to see who had truly held them together, and what they had broken to keep their illusion alive. Time moved forward without ceremony. Months folded into seasons, and the silence Miranda left behind remained intact. She relocated overseas, Lisbon at first, then briefly Copenhagen, until she finally settled in a coastal town in southern Spain. There, in a minimalist apartment with glass walls that overlooked the sea, she began again. No one helped her unpack. No one asked why she had left. She did not offer answers. Her new life required no explanations, no apologies, and no witness from the past. She opened her own architectural studio in a renovated building near the harbor, designing clean, resilient structures for clients who valued space and light more than prestige. Her work gained quiet acclaim. Articles were written, awards arrived, invitations to speak abroad followed. But she never broadcasted her success. She no longer sought recognition from those who once treated her voice like background noise. The validation came not from applause, but from the calm that settled in her chest when she closed her office door each night and looked out at the horizon. Back home, her absence festered into obsession. Her name surfaced constantly, first in worry, then in resentment, then in whispered speculation. They sent birthday cards that returned unopened, left voicemails full of emotion, always ending with pleas or defensiveness. At the family gathering for their grandmother's 90th, her chair was left empty, just in case. At her funeral, they watched the door more than the casket. No one knew where she had gone, and that not knowing gnawed at them more than any confrontation ever could have. They tried reaching out through mutual acquaintances, sending tentative messages under the guise of reconnection. None received a reply. Her digital presence remained non-existent. Travis, once so loud in his dismissal, now seemed haunted. He stopped bragging. His confidence unraveled quietly. He rarely mentioned her now, except in half-jokes that no one laughed at. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived at his office. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of ivory paper. The message was short, handwritten in simple black ink. You proved it wasn't me. I was never your problem. I was your anchor. And without me, you sank. He crumpled the letter in his fist immediately, rage flickering across his face. But the damage had already bloomed long before he read the words. The truth wasn't in the message. It was in everything that had happened since she left. Their family, once united by mutual scapegoating, now barely spoke. Old grievances surfaced without her to absorb the tension. Alliances fractured. The story they had all believed, that Miranda was the sensitive one, the overreactor, the weight dragging them down, had collapsed under the weight of her silence. And in that collapse, Miranda found her final form of justice. Not through revenge, not through spectacle, but through the pure, irreversible absence of herself. She had become untouchable, a quiet force no longer available for their rewriting. Her voice no longer needed to be raised. Her silence said it all. And for the first time, she was at peace, not because they finally saw her, but because she no longer needed to be seen.